but we didn't find any racial bias in police shootings.
This Harvard econ professor, Roland Frier, okay, he made some waves in 2016 when he released a study on sort of race and policing in America. Now, the results, and I believe that we use this or we use one of his reference pieces, it basically disabuses people of the notion, these popular narratives that, black people are shot at a higher rate by police officers.
Which is what we were told over and over and over.
It's not true. Now, just to be clear, all references are available at louderwithcrowder.com. This man is no conservative.
Nope.
He served as the Education Department's Chief Equality Officer under Michael Bloomberg.
Should tell you everything you need to know. It's not a dig at him. He's just unlikely to be the guy delivering these results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is not, a Turning Point USA commentator. And he's black. So that's fun. So he spoke to Barry Weiss, and some people have kind of missed this, but there's some context that I think is not only interesting, but again, directly affects you. Spoke with Barry Weiss regarding the fallout that has taken place from his study.
I collected a lot of data. We collected millions of observations on everyday use of force that wasn't lethal. We collected thousands of observations on lethal force. And it was in this moment in 2016 that I realized people lose their minds when they don't like the result. So what my paper showed, you'll see tomorrow, like some of you, was that yes, we saw some bias in the low-level uses of force, every day pushing up against cars and things like that.
Yeah, Whoopi's hair.
People tend to like that result. But we didn't find any racial bias in police shootings. It was a 104-page, dense, academic economics paper with a 150-page appendix, okay? It was posted for 4 minutes when I got my first email. This is full of shit. Doesn't make any sense. And I wrote back, how'd you read it that fast? I had colleagues take me to the side and say, don't publish this. You'll ruin your career. I said, what are you talking about? I said, what's wrong with it? Do you believe the first part? Yes. Do you believe the second part? Well, the issue is they just don't fit together. If the second part about the police shootings is a literal conversation, I said to them, if the second part showed bias, do you think I should publish it then? And they say, yeah, then it would make sense. I lived under police protection for about 30 or 40 days. I had a 7-day-old daughter at the time. I remember going and shopping for it because, when you have a newborn, you think you have enough diapers, you don't. So I was going to the grocery store to get diapers with an armed guard. It was crazy. It was really, truly crazy.
Now think about that. Think about that for a second. A man who is effectively telling people he should be the bearer of good news. Hey, this actually isn't, you're not being shot in record numbers, right? Remember they were out there saying it was genocide at one point. They use that for everything now. Now it's trans genocide if you don't want kids on puberty blockers. It's black genocide with police officers. He's going out there saying, hey, actually there's good news here. Not as many people hate you as you've been led to believe, and they're certainly not shooting you in record numbers. He's saying it's less violent than you've been taught, and so he then has to suffer at the hands of violence. This can never end. And this is where we talk about how Al Sharpton and people and Barack Obama and now Joe Biden, they're kind of all one and the same. They're out of a job if racism goes away. You need to know that race relations are worse now in America than ever precisely because of what you just saw. That's the academic process. Now, I know because I was published, C. Matheson.
That's right, C.
With a study on fat pride in the era of Donald Trump as a form of self-love. That was accepted. When you say, hold on, it's not a scientific process. When you talk about the peer-reviewed process, when you talk about what is then allowed to be taught in schools and higher education, if you simply don't allow certain points of view to be taught, well, then you can say, well, it just didn't fit our parameters. Well, yeah, because you set them, and the parameters that are set right now require that you believe in systemic racism and you believe a lie. The people setting the parameters proactively lie by blocking the truth from their constituents. Now, let me read you this actual study. This is Frier Study. says, even when officers report civilians have been compliant and no arrest was made, blacks are 21.2% more likely to endure some form of force in an interaction. And this is something we've talked about. You can go back to our Change My Mind videos. As far as unarmed people, there were quite a few years where more unarmed white men were shot. And depending on the year, there can be armed versus unarmed. So that's a number that they'll use to kind of tweak it, where they'll select one in any given year. Now, there are more, I guess you should say, violent police interactions. But what they don't tell you is statistically, black Americans are far more likely not only to resist arrest, but assault officers. So then when you equalize it and you say, okay, hold on a second, the perp has a gun. So at this point, it's not just a judgment call. There's a protocol. Guess what? The numbers are a wash at best. So this context matters. He goes on to say, yet, on the most extreme use of force, officer-involved shootings, we are unable to detect any racial differences in either the raw data or when accounting for controls. And he went on in his conclusion to say, it is plausible that racial differences in lower-level uses of force are simply a distraction, and movements such as Black Lives Matter should seek solutions within their own communities rather than changing the behaviors of police and other external forces.
Pause right there for 1 second. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? You should seek solutions within your own community. Maybe behavioral standards when a cop approaches you. Because, by the way, when he said some level of force, he's not talking about violence. He could be talking about, instead of just talking with you, putting you up against the car and frisking you could be a form of some type of force even when no arrest is made.
Sure.
So behavior matters is what he's saying. And Black Lives Matter is distorting that part of it.
Right.
So he's like, hey, look at yourself first before saying the cops need to change.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this guy was a head of a diversity board under Bloomberg. So let's just be really clear here.
Equality board.
Well, I don't care. Whatever. If, for instance, blacks use their lived experience with police as evidence that the world is discriminatory, then it is easy to understand why black youth invest less in human capital, or black adults are more likely to believe discrimination is an important determinant of economic outcomes. Black dignity matters, he said. Now, let me give you some quick stats on policing, and then I want to go back to Barack Obama after the Dallas police shooting, because the race relations in this country have taken a nosedive. And they've taken a nosedive precisely because of our institutions that have been overtaken by leftists who require racism, sexism, insert whatever ism or phobia here, to be alive in order for them to have a cause. They don't have a war to fight. They're not digging a trench. And so now we're at the point where it's puberty blockers for children. And if you don't support that, you support transgenocide. Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Not only have we done away with slavery, but not only have we gone through the Civil Rights Act, but there's actually affirmative action in these halls of education. No. Systemic racism is worse than ever. More money, please. A grant for me to study systemic racism. It happens all the time. How do I know? Published. Didn't even finish college. So black people in the United States resist arrest 4 times more than whites. I know you'll say, oh, but that's just from the police report. All right. You can't only use statistics when it's convenient for you, you can also believe your lying eyes. Have you been to World Star? Police officers are actually 18.5 times more likely to be killed by a black suspect versus killing a black suspect. Now, this man, Frier, has a study. Okay, and this is kind of some of the news that some of you folks may not know. The Harvard president then launched a sexual harassment investigation into Frier. He was suspended for 2 years with no pay. Wow. Lost access to his lab, where I would imagine he conducted some research. Guess who the Harvard president was?
Well, she was the president. She was a dean at the time.
She was a dean at the time.
So she had limited ability.
Then she became president. Because you'll know her as Harvard president.
Claudine Gay,
plagiarist.
Oh, the one that got ousted for plagiarism.
Oh,
yeah. Let me give you a couple of tidbits here. She went after him. So the study was put out in 2016.
Yes.
Right? It actually got published in 2017 because it had been peer-reviewed and everything. And they had looked at it and said, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. This is a good study. You've done everything right here. And when I say everything right, he didn't believe his own findings. He had 8 full-time researchers going over this. They came back with the results, and he's like, I'm not sure that I believe it. I got 8 more, he said, 8 more full-time researchers to go do it, and they produced the exact same results. It was a rigorous process. This is the man who was the youngest person ever tenured at Harvard at 30. He was the highest paid professor at $600,000 per year, a rising star by everybody's metric, the next brilliant economist. And then he puts out a study that follows the data. And guess who comes a-calling? Claudine Gay, who made a career after going after black people saying the wrong things because it didn't fit her narrative. That's who became president of Harvard. The only reason he wasn't fired is because the dean can't fire you.
Right.
But she suspended him without pay for 2 years, closed his lab, did not just close it down for a little while, got rid of it completely and removed all the funding for it, and then said maybe we'll have harsher penalties for him down the road.
Yeah.
What?
Like, I'm serious. This guy, the same month that he put this paper out, in June, Claudine Gay comes knocking with sexual harassment charges or accusations, allegations.
And it was entrapment.
Same month.
She asked if he wanted to see her tits.
That's true.
And he said no.
And he said, that's plagiarism. I've heard that before.
He said, oh, coming out with the titties all down below your rib cage.
I mean, it's
Sorry,
day out,
this
day
is-
out.
This is so stupid. Like, this guy was attacked.
And this is the reason for Change My Mind. By the way, Change My Minds, when we started, the first ones were never conducted on campus. And we've conducted a lot of them not on campus. But the reason for this is we've actually cited these studies and these statistics, by the way, when we have done, I believe it was the Black Lives Matter as a terrorist organization, Change My Mind, or I don't know if it was affirmative action as racist, Change My Mind. We make all those references available. Why? Because no one is being taught this in higher education. I'm not a teacher. But the professors aren't allowed to teach the research of their own findings if it doesn't suit the narrative that is demanded from the dean, from the president. Insert whoever here.
Yep, exactly.
That's the reason for it. You shouldn't be at SMU. You shouldn't be wherever we go. You shouldn't be there and have students say, I've never heard of that. I've only ever heard that black people are being hunted by police officers. And they say, well, where are you getting that? In this case, your professor. But he's not allowed to talk about it. He's been suspended without pay because Claudine Gay showed him her breasts. Now,
Can you imagine if he did that with math? Can you imagine? No, I don't know. I don't believe in square roots, so
I don't fully
Erased it.
understand them.
yeah. Well,
No, I understand them. I
really.
don't understand trigonometry. I do it, and then I see the number, but I don't believe it.
yeah. Well, that's your right to
What
bias.
my calculator told me.
So that's interesting too what you bring up, and this brings us to the larger picture of race relations in America. Because if you tell people long enough, you tell one group, this is what happens right now. And this really kind of goes to Barack Obama. He was the great divider
Yes.
in chief. All right, he would say to black people, you're being shot, you're being hunted down.
Yeah.
And then we started with, and by the way, white kids who did nothing, by the way, to earn this type of ire, you need to check your privilege. You were born flawed because you're a white male. So you're a victim no matter what. You are the oppressor. Go. What do you think that does? Hey, you go from the era of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Family Matters, and even before that, the Jeffersons, Will Smith being the biggest film star that's ever existed, the biggest athletes, the most recognizable people on earth at one period in time, Michael Jordan,
Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson.
Yep.
You go from that to, hold on a second, BET and World Star, and now you're fragmented. You've divided people. That is what has happened. You will never have another Will Smith. You will never have another Denzel Washington in a largely white country. We just didn't think about it when we were being raised. And you'll say that's because of your white privilege. No, it's because we weren't being taught that we were racist simply through birth, and our black friends weren't being taught that we were racist. There is no winning that game. And by the way, there is no coming back from that as a country if enough people believe it. So this study was issued July 11th, 2016. Yeah. One day before Barack Obama gave this speech after Dallas police officers, for those of you who don't remember, were slain in the streets.
And so when African Americans from all walks of life, from different communities across the country, voice a growing despair over what they perceive to be unequal treatment, when study after study shows that whites and people of color experience the criminal justice system differently, when mothers and fathers raise their kids right and have the talk about how to respond if stopped by a police officer, yes, sir, no, sir, but still fear that something terrible may happen when their child walks out the door, still fear that kids being stupid and not quite doing things right might end in tragedy.
Do you remember this time?
Did you just say
I do. I was at a cousin's wedding in Milwaukee.
I was at home and I heard about this and it pissed me off because his rhetoric directly, 100%, the rhetoric from leaders in the black community like Al Sharpton And Barack Obama led to this shooting.
Yes.
Period. It was the straightest line you could freaking draw.
It was the first round of Black Lives
Right?
Matter.
Exactly. He comes out, comments on Trayvon Martin when apparently every other ongoing investigation is the White House doesn't comment on an ongoing investigation. He fans the flames a little bit.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is happening, and more stuff had happened at that point. And then these police officers were killed. And he comes out and says this. Instead of just saying, hey, I'm really sorry for your loss. We have to do something about crime in this country. We have to do something about people lashing out in this country. We have to do something about whatever, just fixing the problems. He comes out and gives a speech about telling your kids the right thing to do because they may act up. You mean like pulling a gun from your waistband in Chicago? You mean like attacking a cop in Ferguson?
Right.
That acting up? Is that what you're talking about? A guy was killed that went to my church. He was a police officer who was in my church, in my community, protected that church as an off-duty police officer. He'd been killed because of your rhetoric and the kind of rhetoric that you had been pushing your entire life, and you came down and lectured police officers who had just lost a brother about a conversation people have to have because they maybe act up.
Right.
How about come down and say, I'm sorry that I have broken this country in such a way that it may not ever be fixable, and I was supposed to be the person in 2008 that fixed race relations.
How about come down and speak the truth? How about come down and say, now, I know that I'm supposed to say that no, don't get weed up, that every cop is racist, and I'll couch my words so I don't say it, but how about he just comes down and says, look, what we just experienced is the result of officers being 18 times more likely to be shot by a black citizen than shooting a black citizen. We've lost context. Get wee-weed up. He makes up terms because he's full of shit.
He does it every time. Yeah.
No, that's the truth.
Watch Slider with Crowder live Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.